Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. I've been looking forward to putting something like this together for a while. I've gotten really fascinated, more recently with the Beach Boys, and it's really this time period where we're going to be focusing on in this video. So this video is not going to be kind of a career spanning from very beginning to now. Look at the Beach Boys. I'm really honing in about 1965 to 1973. That period, I think they did their most amazing work. They were the most interesting, like trying to do groundbreaking things and or survive. and, and which I find both kind of parts interesting. So that's really what I'm going to be focusing on. And why do I cut it off at those points? I think it was about 65, starting off in 65, when Brian Wilson's brilliance really is able to manifest itself. I mean, it had shown itself a bit before, but it was kind of very restricted, stifled, and still developing, right? And I think in '65 is when he really just sort of blows up, as the creative genius that he is. And why cut it off at '73? They were the Beach Boys are really at a crossroads in '73. Um, they had just released. Well, you'll see. We're kind of where I'm going to rank these records during this period. I ranked that record in '73, pretty high, and they could have kept going in that direction, which I think would have been really fascinating, but they didn't. They instead this was put out, right? Beach Boys' Endless Summer, double album hits collection, focusing primarily on the earlier stuff, early to mid '60s tunes, you know, and I'm trying to think of what. Just gotta look on here. Yeah, I mean it's all pretty much early stuff, and this was put out as sort of a stopgap, but it just took off. I mean, it sold tons. It basically took them out of where they were, which was near bankruptcy at the time as an organization, and they started touring on it and became, in my view, pretty much what they've been, which is kind of a nostalgia act. I mean, I know there's some people that are some fans of kind of some of the later '70s records, and I respect that. That's cool, but I'm not that into that. So more or less, I guess, especially if you get into the '80s and beyond, from the '80s on, and, pretty much a nostalgia act. I saw them live in the mid '80s, and even then it was a total, playing all the '60s hits basically. Uh, it was fun, but you know, not a lot of ground was being broken. You know what I mean? So yeah, this it was like fork in the road there. A little bit after '73, and they went the more profitable route, but I think the less artistically satisfying of of routes with this. And honestly, at the same token, you know, as far as full albums go, like this is fine for me for kind of hitting those early singles. I don't need to even own full albums prior to 1965. So now, there's two things I'm not including on this list. I am not going to include the various reconstructions of Smile. Okay, uh, this is a fine, you know, reconstruction that was put together. That's what the cover art may have looked like. Great photo in here. This is all great. Brian Wilson did his own reconstruction. I have that on CD somewhere, but yeah, and then they kind of tried to put this together of what Smile. The reason I'm not including Smile, we might as well just talk about it here. Most of Smile was the supposed to be the genius, brilliant follow up to Pet Sounds, right? And there was much hype. Brian Wilson is a genius, all that kind of campaign, and it never happened. A combination of Brian's nervous, kind of mental state, his breakdown, drug use, uh, members in the group kind of pulling in different directions, all that stuff. I mean, I don't need to give you much of this history, but probably the most legendary lost album of all time, right? Smile. And they have, I think, put together some pretty good representations of what's, at least from what was made and done at that up to that point, what Smile might have looked like. But this is not Smile. And I say that because Smile doesn't exist. It's a phantom. Because it was never finished. I mean, Brian Wilson, like I said, just sort of broke down and was in the midst of putting it all together. It was never, we don't know what a completed Smile would have actually ended up as. There's probably a close proximity. Some of these songs definitely would have been there, but yeah. So I'm just not going to put it in a ranking. The only other one I'm not going to rank is the only one out of this period I don't have. I've heard it, but I just don't have it. It's Beach Boys Party, right? Which is actually kind of fun, but yeah, it's kind of a toss off, kind of a live album, sort of semi live album. They got together in the studio with some acoustic guitars and bongos and did a bunch of covers. They even do some Beatles covers and all that. And they do a couple of their own tunes. And they brought in friends and family to make it sound like a, kind of like a campfire sing along or something. And, it's fun. Actually, there's some people that are big fans of it. But it's not, they go with these studio albums, so not including that either. Okay. Enough of the introductions. Actually, no, one more introduction. They have been, earlier this year, I did a review of this, right? Sail on Sailor, which is the Carl and the Passion So Tough in Holland reissue. Beautiful set. Earlier on, there is this, which is Feel Flows, which is Sunflower Surfs Up sessions. These are spectacular, wonderful packages. Get them. Okay, now let's get going. So, we're dealing with 11 records here, if you don't include the ones I said we're not including. At number 11, I have Carl and the Passions. Okay, Carl and the Passions, So Tough, from 1972. This was the first of two records where, was it Ricky Fattar and Blondie Chaplin joined the band. I think the second record those two were on is a lot better. We'll get to that later. But, it's still kind of unsure here. There's just nothing on here that really stands out. It's kind of interesting. It's called Carl and the Passions because before they were the Beach Boys, one of their early iterations was a short-lived little group they called Carl and the Passions, where Carl Wilson was sort of up front. And this is another reason I'm actually very interested in this whole time period. Is not only Brian Wilson's genius, but when he does start to fall apart and fade back, I find it fascinating how people like Carl Wilson and Dennis Wilson and Mike Love and some of the other guys, Bruce Johnson, sort of like have to step up to keep the group going, and they do in very interesting ways. So that's another. We'll get to some of that. But anyway, to me, I think the least memorable of these records of this era is Carl and the Passions. Okay, number 10, I have from 1970, Sunflower. Now, I know this album has a lot of fans, and because of its sort of simplicity and kind of back to basics approach, which actually several of these are. But yeah, again, this is another one where there's add some music to your day. I mean, there's just not that many cool waters. All right, there's just not that many songs on Sunflower that really kind of stand out to me. It just seems kind of slight to me. All right, number 9. Now, number 9, I do have on one of the 2 for records, but it doesn't have the album art on that one. So I'm going to use the CD that I have that does have the album art. 1968's Friends. Okay, so Friends, I have it number 9. And yeah, the title track is really good, I think. Be Here in the Mornings. Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get into some stuff that I think is really good. Diamond Head is kind of cool. Starting to get into some stuff that I find really really interesting. But there's some garbage on here too, man. Anna Lee, the healer. Uh, you know, I think it's a Mike Love song about his masseuse. Whatever, dude. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I mean, we're starting to get in I think some interesting territory here. Now at number 8, this is one of these they do a lot of twofers, the Beach Boys. This is on one of these twofer CDs, and so the other, and this is the only version I have is on CD, uh, is 2020, which was 1969. This was largely cobbled together with kind of leftovers, some leftover tracks. At the same time, though, it actually, I think it plays pretty well. There's some good tracks on there. "Do It Again" is like one of those songs that is just absurdly catchy. you know, just I don't know. To me, like I hear it, and then like the rest of the day, I've got the dun, 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 just like I can't get that out of my head because it's like so catchy. It was a cool tune, though. Um, I Can Hear Music is great. Great Carl Wilson vocal on that. Something very interesting here. Wait. The Yeah, Never Learn to Love. The Dennis Wilson song on here was actually composed by Charles Manson. Now, some of you, if you know a bit about Beach Boys lore and history, you know that Dennis Wilson had kind of a very uncomfortable relationship with Charles Manson and his cult, his followers, for a little while. It started with picked a couple of the girls up as hitchhikers and took them back to his place. And him being Dennis Wilson and it being the time period, sexual shenanigans ensued. And before he knew it, these girls were bringing over some other girls and their guru by the name of Charles Manson. And Wilson and Manson became, friends for a while. And in fact, the whole, not I don't think quite by Dennis Wilson's desires, but the whole cult kind of moved into his house for a little while. And Manson sort of offered the favors of his girls to Wilson in exchange for Manson thought Wilson was going to help Manson get his foot in the door in the music biz. Manson considered himself a songwriter musician. He even did put out a record. And so Wilson did set up some recording sessions, didn't go anywhere, and Wilson had set up with Terry Melcher, and of course Terry Melcher had rented the house where Sharon Tate and the others were killed, of course, and that's how Manson knew where that house was because of the Terry Melcher connection. So it's kind of interesting stuff. But anyway, there's this song that Dennis Wilson renamed, as "Never Learned to Love," and I'm totally drawing a blank on what the original title was when Manson wrote it. We'll figure it out. We'll put it up there. But supposedly Charles Manson was pretty angry, when he sees Dennis Wilson writing credit on this song, and supposedly there was some harsh words between the two, and Wilson was threatened. All right, number 7. We're gonna go back now to 1965 with "Summer Days and Summer Nights." This is an interesting record because it does sort of, it kind of on both sides of the fence. It does reach back to that sort of earlier, surfer, kind of more innocent Beach Boys thing prior to 65, but it's starting to get more complicated here, right? And, you have "California Girls," which I think to this day, usually I've seen in interviews, Brian Wilson says that's his favorite song he's put together. And "California Girls" is brilliant musically, it's genius. At the same time, you got crap like "I'm Bugged Out at My Old Man," which is laughably bad. But yeah, like stuff like the sublime "California Girls" and "I'm Bugged Out at My Old Man" share space on the same record, which can be frustrating, but it's also kind of interesting. You got the re-recorded version of "Help Me Rhonda" on here. Uh, "Let Him Run Wild" is awesome. So yeah, you're starting to get Brian Wilson, where he's really kind of doing some genius stuff. Actually, the record before this is even better, but you'll see it later in the list. Oh, in the same year. Okay, number 6, I have "Wild Honey," which is 1967. There you go. This is fantastic. So from here on out, we're starting to get where I really love these records. Wild Honey is great. There's a simplicity to it. They kind of wanted to get into a little bit of R&B, which I think they do, but still retain Beach Boysness. That's a word. But it's interesting because think about what else was going on in 1967. Psychedelia was blowing up. Hendrix, all this stuff, and this was so out of step. But what's interesting is this actually doesn't sound as dated as some of that other stuff. Some of that other stuff is brilliant, of course, but it's really of its time. This sounds like kind of this sort of like back to basics, DIY type of stuff that people like to do today. And so ironically, like with a lot of these records, like with this one was kind of dismissed critically at the time in most circles, but since then has grown to be very well respected and beloved. Yeah, Wild Honey's fantastic. All right, at number 5, I have the last one in this period that I think is really really amazing, and that is Holland. Where actually I recently did a review of that Sail on Sailors set, so I kind of gave you a bit of background on the Holland record already recently. But yeah, where they actually went to Holland to record, and interesting stories there. But they came out with a great record. Sail on Sailor, with Blondie Chaplin on lead vocals, is fantastic. Steamboat's a great Carl Wilson vocal. Like that, even the California Saga, that 3-part thing with Mike Love and Al Jardine. There's that really stupid like spoken word part. The rest of it is really beautiful. To me, the highlight here is The Traitor, Carl Wilson. That is a stunner of a track. Oh, especially about halfway through where it kind of shifts a little bit, and Carl Wilson's vocal is just otherworldly great. So, all right. Coming in at number 4, we have Smiley Smile. So Smiley Smile, 1967. In the wake of the Smile disaster, what you see is that a lot of pieces of Smile start to show up here and there on these records. And this was not Smile. It was Smile. Smile is falling apart because it was being so meticulously put together. And this was really that they just decided to kind of go all the way the other way, just go back to basics and do. And Smiley Smile is a really charming album. Now I don't have the original album art. This is one of these older twofers where I've got Smiley Smile on this, so editor can throw up the actual album art for Smiley Smile. But yeah, so the two pieces off of Smile that actually showed up were Heroes and Villains, which I think is great, and then Good Vibrations, right, which is legendary for how many takes. It was kind of this method Wilson was using where he wanted to record like 4 or 5 second little snippets, and then he could rearrange them and put them together in these different ways. And Good Vibrations is one of the great songs of production, right? But it's really weird because you have those two like meticulously produced tracks on there, and then everything else there it sounds really just thrown together. But like I said, in a really charming way, and where Smiley Smile now is really respected because that's like kind of in right now. You know, people like sort of the DIY back to basics type of recording. There's Vegetables, there's wind chimes, whistling. I mean, just really strange, you know. And of course, vegetables, vegetables or vegetables. I've seen it kind of written out both ways. Um, is always notable because Paul McCartney supposedly is on that track where he plays the celery, like you hear in rhythm, someone crunching on celery. Supposedly that's Paul McCartney. So there you go. McCartney was on a Beach Boys record. But yeah, I mean, Smiley Smile is like you listen to it and it sounds so slight, but it's like so charming and fun. And then you got these like two, incredibly intricate tracks tacked on there too. It's a fascinating listen. It really is. All right, top three here. So at number three, I have the earliest in this whole time period. It's the Beach Boys today. This is the one, especially is side two. Side two of this, the kind of side that features the first side. It actually is great, but it's kind of more up tempo stuff. Really great opener. Do you want to dance with Dennis Wilson on vocals, which I love. The original version of Help Me Rhonda, which I think is great, is on there too. But it's really on side two where kind of the ballads are focused, which like starts to show the seeds of Pet Sounds, the genius that was to come. Please let me wonder. I'm so young. Kiss me, baby. She knows me too well. In the back of my mind, just gorgeous stuff. It's no coincidence. This is what around when Brian Wilson decided to stop touring, with the Beach Boys and just focus on like the studio work. Yeah, and then typical Beach Boys fashion, they have this like transcendently great record side, and then they close it with Bull Session with the Big Daddy, which I mean is one of the most amazing, just amazingly ridiculous tracks I've ever heard on a record. I mean, it literally is, it's just the final track on the record, just them sitting around talking in the studio like about hardly like nothing. Like half of it is a fast food orders being delivered and they're like divvying up the burgers and fries. I'm not kidding. Like seriously. Okay, whatever. But don't let. I mean, it's like so bad and ridiculous that I'm actually glad it's there, right? But don't let that obviously detract from the otherwise genius of side two of Beach Boys today. I mean, it really is kind of a warm up for Pet Sounds. And at number two, I do have Pet Sounds. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, before you hose me in the comments, yes, this should be number one. This, if I'm doing some objective list that these are the most important. Yes, this is one of the most important records and greatest records ever made by anybody. you know, yeah. But there is one Beach Boys record from this era that I personally prefer more. So I will talk about in a minute. But yeah, so for me, yeah, okay, Pet Sounds, I have it too. Um, and what do I need to say about Pet Sounds? I think it deserves and earns all the accolades it gets. It is genius. It is brilliant. Uh, you know, Brian Wilson. That's this is why. you know, um, yeah. I even like actually, especially like I even like the two instrumentals on there. They in some ways they kind of initially might sound like throwaways, but even those are just so great to listen to. God only knows. I think Paul McCartney famously said that may be the most beautiful song ever written in popular music. Maybe so. Um, yeah. To me, what really kills me, I just wasn't made for these times. In some ways, so self-aware, and just, oh, I mean, that just kills me. Yeah, I mean, I don't, so much ink has been spilled on the greatness of Pet Sounds. But there you go. I have it. I have it at my number two favorite. But my favorite Beach Boys record, period, and obviously from this time period, is Surf's Up from 1971. I love Surf's Up. I mean, well, first let's address the title track, which was one of those pieces left over from Smile, and put on here. And there are lots of different versions of that song, like there were of everything from Smile. Brian Wilson recorded over and over and over again. But Surf's Up, the song, might just be the most beautiful song. I don't know. It's up there. It is just stunning to me. I listen to it. It takes me to a different place. I mean, it really does. But yeah, really everything on here is pretty great. Disney Girls from Bruce Johnston is really beautiful nostalgia there. A Long Promised Road. I think Carl Wilson really shines here. Long Promised Road from Carl Wilson is great. But the other great, other than Surf's Up, great song is Feel Flows from Carl Wilson. That is incredible. So underrated. People don't talk about that. Till I Die from Brian Wilson that's gorgeous too. Wow. I mean, this is just, yeah, it's so amazing. And yes, there's got to be one thing on there that kind of takes you out of the greatness. You count on Mike Love, right? Student Demonstration Time. It was based on Riot and Cell Block Number 9, but Mike updates the lyrics to try and connect with the protests. It's embarrassing, but other than that, nearly perfect record. So great. Yeah. So yeah, if you're kind of casually know the Beach Boys, but this would be one to grab is Surf's Up, and it's part of that Feel Flows set too. So with Sunflower as the other record, but Surf's Up. That is my favorite Beach Boys record. Okay, well, just real quick, show you two comps. There's a billion Beach Boys compilations out there, but this is a cool. I just found this on CD, but I'm sure it's on vinyl out there somewhere. It's called 10 Years of Harmony. It's a 2-disc set, and it kind of covers the 70s basically. And so, hits some of this stuff, like the Surf's Up stuff and the Holland stuff, but then some of the later 70s stuff too. It's worth having, want to explore that. And I want to end with this. This is just some real cheap comp called Good Vibrations, the best of the Beach Boys, that I found in some used bin somewhere for $5 a while back. And that's what started me on this journey. I mean, I had Pet Sounds. I already knew Pet Sounds was amazing, but that was about it. And this is a comp that basically starts with Pet Sounds era and goes through 73. And so, it's got Sail on Sailor, Sloop John B, God Only Knows, Darlin', Add Some Music to Your Day, Wouldn't It Be Nice, Good Vibrations, Do It Again, Caroline No, Friends, Surf's Up, and Heroes and Villains. And when I grabbed this and listened to this, that's when it sort of opened up. It's like, wait a minute, there's more during this era that I really need to explore. So, I don't know. If nothing else, just kind of a tip of the hat to that record. Well, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. I hope you've enjoyed the Beach Boys video here. You have some thoughts. You have some favorites. You have some favorites outside of this time period. Let's talk in the comments. That would be interesting. Well, all right, guys. I think... No, actually, no. I'm just trying to think of what's coming up next after this. I think I do need to do a 1976 video, so we'll do that. And then something else. And then probably the week after is when, at least at the time that I'm recording this, I don't know who won our poll. So whoever wins our poll, that'll be the week that we prep probably after that. So, all right, guys. See you next time. Thanks.